In our previous video, we looked at Robbins and Judge theory on the key components of effective teams. And as we were looking at process for the team, one thing that is part of that process is how we deal with conflict. And so let's dive deeper into that issue of conflict. So I'm just going to jump forward a bit from our previous discussion. So we need to identify what type of conflict our team has. So conflict, of course, is some perceived difference that results in some form of interference or opposition. So people are not in agreement. The question is why are they not in agreement? Is it a task conflict? So there the disagreement is about what we're doing or about the goal. Why is it we're doing it? What are we trying to accomplish? Or maybe it's more process oriented in terms of what steps should we take. Task conflict at low to moderate levels is beneficial to the team. And we talked about Tuckman's stages of group development, right? We talk about that storming as we figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, that then is eventually going to create the norms for our team. So we need some level of task conflict as we debate what to do, why are we doing it, what's the end goal. So some task conflict, low to moderate levels, is helpful for the team. What we're concerned about with the team is more relationship conflict. So this is where your team doesn't get along. They are dysfunctional. They don't like each other. They don't trust each other. So we lack the interpersonal relationships. Relationship conflict is always going to be detrimental to the team. And so that's why when you look at team leadership and you look at discussions of teams, there's often this conversation about team building. How do you build this cohesion? And it's because that relationship conflict can really hurt the team's performance. And so if you continue on in our business degree, you're going to take courses in cross-cultural awareness. So how do you build diverse teams and understand and empathize people who are different from you? You'll take courses in interpersonal skills and leadership, looking at how you deal with that relationship conflict and create more of that cohesion. For today in this intro level class, let's simply look at, in terms of that conflict, what are our options? And we've talked a little bit about conflict already in terms of different approaches to conflict. And we looked at Follett's approach in terms of conflict management as well. So if your group if you have more of a cooperative group and less assertive people, then you're going to have more accommodation. So this is where you're just going to relent, let someone be right, and just move on. Okay, so that's what accommodating you see on the bottom right. If you have people who don't like conflict, they're going to tend to be more of the accommodating. They'd rather just get along, so they'll just agree with that more outspoken person, even if they truly don't agree with what the individual is pushing for. Sometimes you need accommodation so you can move on. So recognizing, and that's one of the Pearson-Revel surveys we did in a previous video, looking at when is it best just to accommodate. On the other side of that, if you have a more assertive individual, right, they're pushing for their agenda, sometimes you just need to force one person's view in terms of the conflict. So again, back to that previous survey that we did in a previous video, sometimes it is more appropriate just to force one person's perspective to resolve the conflict. This is, if it's a vital issue, you need the manager, the leader to step in, an emergency. Often when we're doing that forcing, it's going to be someone of authority who can come in and make the unpopular decision. So we need to recognize, do we have people who just want to avoid conflict in our team? Do we have people who are more assertive, who are going to force their way? Do we need a third party to come in and do that forcing when the team can't agree? So if we think back to Follett and the different outcomes of conflict, right? She was talking about either you're going to have one person's perspective forced on others, that's the forcing, or you're just going to relent and you're going to give in, that's the accommodating. Other aspects that we see from Follett is the compromise. So here, remember what Follett said in terms of compromise, that it just delays the conflict. So when do you use a more compromising approach? Well, if you need a temporary agreement so you can move forward, recognizing that it's not actually resolving the conflict itself, but it is going to give you a temporary solution so you can keep your progress, you can keep moving. When is compromising best used? Well, if we can agree on the end goal, but we can't agree on process, then perhaps we can compromise on the process, because really what we're focused on is that final outcome. There are some times when you just avoid the conflict. So if we have conflict within our team, can we take a break, let people cool down, regain their perspective, particularly when it's an issue that's trivial? If it's not actually going to impact the final outcome of the project, then you can just avoid the conflict. So this is where your team leader can come in as mediator and say, okay, we recognize the team doesn't agree. Let's set that aside for a moment. Let's focus our energy on this other aspect of our work. And so you just set it aside, and with enough time, recognize that it's not it doesn't impact the final performance, or people can just let it go over time. The other piece here in terms of how we can deal with conflict is collaboration. So coming back to Follett's idea of a win-win. So can we merge different perspectives? Can we mend the relationships? Can we find an alternative outcome that isn't necessarily what either party was pushing for, but they both support? And so something that really does resolve the conflict by coming up with a new alternative. So as we look at our team and managing our team, we look at, how well can we manage the team? How well can we get them to be cohesive? How well can we deal with the conflict that exists? So when you're evaluating a team that you're part of, here we have a survey from Pearson Revel, and this one is about diagnosing the need for team building. So it assumes that you already have some kind of team when you're answering the questions, and it's looking at how much do you need to improve that cohesion and reduce the interpersonal conflict of the team. So the questions you answer are going to be very much based on the team you're in, not on you individually. And so if we do the survey, it is assuming that you are part of some kind of team already. So it's assessing the need of a team. And so it's looking at what is your perception in terms of, does that team need some work on cohesion, on reducing interpersonal conflict? So it looks at what kind of challenges there might be as we look at your organization. If we recognize that we need to work on building our team, there are different aspects of team development. And so this survey from Pearson Revel helps you better understand the contributions you make to building the effective team. And so there's a number of different components we want to look at here. You have a role in terms of leading the team, being a member of the team, and then diagnosing and facilitating the team's development. So in the first one, it looks at how well you are able to articulate a vision and build a coalition around your goals. So are you able to set that vision, that strategy, and get the group to follow you? That's the first one. And then how are you in terms of being a member of the team? Are you versatile? Are you willing to perform multiple roles? Do you have strong interpersonal communication skills? Do you have a desire to combat negative emotions and handle conflict? If you are one who tends to avoid conflict or high emotional experiences, then you're going to notice a lower number in terms of that effective team member. And then the last piece we're looking at is, how are you in terms of being able to help the team develop and perform? Can you identify the strengths of the team and capitalize on that? Can you help the team in terms of enhancing their overall performance? So as we're looking at diagnosing the team, we look at the role of the leader, we look at the role of the team member, and we look at the ability to identify when the team needs work and facilitate the work of the team in terms of their cohesion. There's another Pearson-Revel survey we'll look at here. And so here we're looking at the impact that both individuals and the team have on the group. So in terms of team competencies. And so we'll look at the number of different team competencies here. So if we think about your team, it rates you as high, moderate, or low, and it's breaking down competencies into a number of different aspects. So conflict resolution, your ability to solve problems, recognizing sources of conflict, and confronting those issues. So how well do you do in terms of resolving conflict and facilitating solutions for your team? How well do you do in terms of collaborative problem solving? So working with a team to solve problems, identifying the issue, bringing it to the group's attention, identifying potential obstacles, and then getting the group to work together to solve the problems. So do you value the team's perspective in terms of contributing to solving the problem? Then we have communication. So how well are you in terms of openly and effectively communicating with your team? Are you able to contribute to the team's performance? Do you listen? Do you observe nonverbal and verbal communications from others? Are you able to convey your ideas and your knowledge to the team? How do you do in terms of goal setting and performance management? So can you set goals that are both challenging but also achievable by your team? So do you set reasonable goals for your group that everyone can contribute towards? And then do you provide productive feedback in terms of how well your team is doing in terms of meeting those goals? And then the last piece in terms of team competency is planning and task coordination. So how do you do in terms of divvying up the work evenly between the team, clearly defining the individual roles and expectations? So are you able to delegate to the team and coordinate their work towards the end goal? So we can see here in this team competencies, as we look at an effective team in terms of this particular survey, it's looking at, can team members resolve conflict? Can they collaborate in their problem solving? So it's not just individual problem solving, but team problem solving. Can we communicate with each other? Can we set goals and manage our performance? And can we divvy up the work equitably and make sure that the tasks and expectations are clear? So coming back to our discussion about leading teams, the role of the team leader is to liaison with the external organizations, to come in and provide a third-party perspective if necessary, manage the conflict, coach, motivate, help create cohesion. So we also looked with Tuckman's group development that once that group has done our aspects, let's quickly go back real fast, way back. Once the team leader has helped with the forming, the storming, once we get to the norming and performing, the team leader is more hands-off. The team leader comes back in to help with adjournment. So when we look at the team leader's role, what management, what the leadership needs to do is they need to make some decisions early on. Apologies for all this. They need to first decide, is the team needed? What are the tasks, the expectations for the team? Can we identify the individual contributions? Remember, as we're looking at motivating that team, we do need to recognize the individual contributions within the performance of the team itself. The team leader can help with that conflict management and helping create cohesion. First, in building the team. So do we have the diverse skills and abilities? Do they have the resources? Can we create shared goals? Can we create an effective size to the team? And then can we manage the conflict and coach the team to create a more cohesive group? So the team leader can shape the behavior of the team in selecting the team, in training the team, and then coming back. I know we mention it over and over again, but Vroom's expectancy theory is really dominant in leadership and motivation and management in terms of effort being aligned with performance, and performance matching. Does your high effort mean you are recognized as performing well? If you perform well, do you get rewarded for it? And do those rewards match what people desire? So management leadership helps in selecting, helps in training, and helps making sure the rewards and recognition for the team's work and the individual contributions encourage, motivate the team to be effective. Lastly, we recognize that teams are not always the answer. Don't use teams if you have a group of individuals who would just rather work alone. Sometimes the jobs, the tasks are independent. That is, they are not amenable to teamwork. It is something that really just one expert needs to do. Are your rewards more suited to individual effort and performance? So back to our expectancy theory. And then even back to Steve Kerr and looking at, do your rewards align with the outcomes you're trying to achieve? If the rewards are really based on individuals' performance versus the group, so we don't have rewards for the group and group cohesion, but simply for individuals, that can create an issue where there's an incentive for the group not to be cohesive, but to be more individualistic if what we're rewarding is only the individual behavior. So that goes back to Steve Kerr as well as to Skinner in terms of do the outcomes that we want, is that really what our rewards are incentivizing? Teams are more useful when we can take those work processes and cut them across functional lines. Smaller groups if speed is important. We need groups if it's very complex, so we need to understand different perspectives, different relationships. If the organization itself is quite complex, if we need more creative thinking, more innovation, right? We've talked before in terms of the benefit of teams. And we need to look at in terms of the teams, how they best work together. How do we need people to interact in order to be effective? So recognizing that we don't always need team-based work. We need to recognize how our individuals prefer to work. We need to recognize the tasks itself. What do they require? More team-based, more individual-based. What does the organizational structure require? How have we aligned the work in terms of departmentalization, in terms of complexity? Do we need it to be more team-based or individual-based? So even though we've been talking about effective teams, you don't always need a team. And it's important for leadership to recognize when you need it to be teamwork and when individual work is more appropriate.